Hi, this is Valerie Leonard again. I am the founder of nonprofit Utopia. I want to welcome you to lesson 2 of lasting impact, building sustainable organizations. We will focus on powerful organizations. And before we go forward, I want to make sure that you have downloaded the workbook and you're following along. You should be on lesson 2. You should go to your notes section where you can take notes on this section as well as take the quiz afterwards. In the first lesson, we covered the definition of capacity as it relates to this course. We also looked at the state of nonprofit capacity building in the Chicago area, and we indicated that just because we focused on Chicago doesn't mean that you who don't live in Chicago can't benefit from the lessons that we learned about capacity building in Chicago, because capacity building is universal and every organization, regardless of its size or its complexity or relative simplicity, must go through a capacity building and management process. The interventions will vary based on various factors. And we also talked about the trends in capacity building, the importance of nonprofit compliance, and the characteristics of sustainable organizations. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at the definition of powerful as it relates to this course. We'll also be looking at the characteristics of powerful organizations and the typical activities in which powerful organizations engage. So our working definition of powerful is having the ability to control or influence people or things, hopefully for positive change, or having a strong effect on someone or something. And in this case, we will hope that the someone is our clients and the something is our community. And as Merriam-Webster would put it, having great prestige. So when we dig deeper and look at the characteristics of powerful organizations, we find that powerful organizations have the capacity, or what we call the efficacy, to fulfill their missions. They influence others, that would include their clients, their communities. They have influence with other organizations and elected officials and other stakeholders. They also have strong brands. And when I talk about brands, I'm not talking about the logo. I'm talking about their you know, their reputations. And they also have the ability to make great impact on the lives of their clients and communities, and a track record of affecting change. So how do organizations get power? So I would liken this to the analogy of a mother and her child. When they get on the plane, they listen to the flight attendant, and before the flight takes off, the flight attendant says, place the oxygen mask on yourself first before helping small children or others who may need your assistance. So powerful organizations, in the same way, they help themselves first, and not in a selfish way, but they have to make sure that they are in a position of strength. And as the old saying goes, you can't be of much help to others if you are in a weakened position yourself. So in order to have a sustainable impact on clients and communities, organizations must go through their own self-reflection process and put systems in place to ensure their own survival. I've seen it all too often where organizations may be relatively young in their development. They get caught up in, say, a community planning process or a significant development project that will pull them away from their day-to-day operations and not be able to sustain themselves because they have focused on things that were not germane, to their own survival first. So one of the first things that powerful organizations do to get power is to actually build internal capacity. So they demonstrate capacity over several areas, and this would include leadership, board development, programs and service delivery, management systems, financial management systems, fundraising, personnel, networking, and impact. And when I talk about networking, I'm talking about their ability to maintain relationships with various stakeholders throughout the community, including their own clients. And when I talk about impact, I'm talking about the difference that they're able to make in the lives of their clients and communities. Number two, powerful organizations solidify influence with key stakeholders. They strengthen their relationships with their clients, local community members, other organizations, elected officials, funders, other stakeholders. And one of the ways they do this is to build trust. And they do this by following through on commitments with excellence. So when we look at the element of trust, strong relationships are built on trust as a foundation. And there are four pillars of trust, and that includes intent and integrity, capability, and results. So when we look at trust, trust is not just a matter of, I think this person is telling the truth. It's a whole lot more complex than that. Um, we look at our intent, which is our ability to care and be transparent and open. We look at the organization's integrity. Are they honest? Are they fair? Are they authentic? Are they real? Can we really, really believe that they're sincere in what they say and do? Are the organization's staff, are they competent? Do they have skills? Do they have knowledge? Do they have experience to do what it is they say they're going to do? And when we look at the results, do they have the reputation and credibility and the performance to back it up? So all of these elements together give this visceral or gut feeling of whether or not we can trust an organization. Are they reliable? Do we want to with them? And Gordon Treadgold, who's an international authority on leadership, he said, no trust, no leadership. He goes on to say we can all have off days when it comes to competence, but it's any failure in character that can be very difficult to forgive and forget. He says that we must have 100% integrity and intent, and these are all-time things and not part-time things, and it needs to be in all aspects of our lives. If we can't be trusted in the home, then we definitely can't be trusted in the office. So our organizations, basically, we need to walk the walk and talk the talk. Powerful organizations strengthen their brands. And again, as I said before, a brand is not just the logo. A brand is the entire experience that you get from beginning to end, from the time you first encounter that organization until your last encounter. So this could be communications, the quality of their programs and services, your experiences you feel once you are at a fundraiser or in their office, and their ability to follow through on their promises and their claims. In fact, according to Jerry McLaughlin, who is a contributor to Forbes magazine, brand is the perception someone holds in their head about you, a product, a service, an organization, a cause, or an idea. Brand building is the deliberate and skillful application of effort to create a desired perception in someone else's mind. Word of caution about having that desired perception in someone else's mind. Make sure that the perception that you desire people to have is actually real, because over time, we can say things, we can promote things, but when people feel that your actions are not congruent with what the organization says it is, that can be problematic. Number four, Powerful organizations positively impact the lives of the clients and communities they serve. And when we talk about impact, it's the degree to which the lives and communities change as a result of the organization's program, services, and advocacy. And impact should be measured, documented, and communicated regularly. And when we talk about communicate it regularly, it needs to be communicated to the people who are actually doing the work, it needs to be communicated to the people who live in the community, it needs to be communicated to the people who use your services, it needs to be communicated to the people who are your partners, people who are potential partners, people who are giving you money, elected officials, etc., etc. And it should be consistent messaging. Number 5, powerful organizations affect sustainable change or change over the long term, and this is internal as well as external. So, sustainable change may or may not be driven by external pressures to change. However, sustainable change does require a clear, shared vision, capacity for change, actionable first steps, leadership that models the way, reinforcement and evaluation, and continuous improvement. Now here on this slide, the University of Sydney, they created a visual that helps bring that point home. As you see, the way this chart is organized, we have on every row all of the 7 factors that we talked about that should be present in order for us to drive successful change. So in the first column, we've got pressure for change. The second column, we've got clear shared vision. The third column, we have capacity for change. The fourth column, we have actionable first steps. The next column, modeling the way. The column after that, we have reinforcement and solidification of change. And then after that, we're talking about evaluation and improvement, consistently. So all of those factors together can lead to successful change. Now in the second row, if we're missing that pressure for change and we still have all the other factors, you can still have successful change. So the difference between the first and the second row, we see that the change is not coming from pressure, but the organization has taken it upon themselves to be proactive to make change. In the next row, if we have all those factors present, but the clear and shared vision is missing, what we end up with is a quick start and it soon fizzles. In the next row, if we see that the capacity for change is missing and all the other factors remain present, then what we end up with is anxiety and frustration. Because, we want to do things, but we just don't have the capability. We might not have enough money to hire people. Our staff may not necessarily have the training. We may not necessarily understand all there is to know about social media, blah, 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 blah. So when we have that capacity missing and we have everything else, it could be problematic. Now, when we don't have those actionable first steps and everything else is present, what we'll end up with is a haphazard effort and many false starts. When we don't have leadership that models the way, they pretty much tell you what to do, but they're not necessarily walking the walk, then cynicism builds up. In the next row, we see that if we don't constantly reinforce and solidify the change and all the other factors are present, what we end up doing is going back to our old ways eventually. And then if we don't continuously evaluate and improve our processes, what we'll end up doing is stagnating. We'll get to a certain point in development and then we stop growing. So A really important process that powerful organizations go through is a theory of change. And basically, a theory of change describes a process of planned social change, including the assumptions that guide its design to the long term goals it seeks to achieve. And we can do it as a map of a process of change or flow chart, and it establishes a blueprint for the work ahead of us, and it anticipates the likely effects of our work, and it reveals what should be evaluated when and how. And that comes from using a theory of change to guide planning and evaluation, and that was published by Grant Craft, which is a project of the Ford Foundation. And likewise, this flowchart comes from the same source. So we see here that the organization starts off with its mission. It makes certain assumptions about the environment, and they target a specific population, and based on the assumptions they've made about the environment and the target that they have selected, they begin to develop strategies and programs, and they look at the outcomes, and then after they get the outcomes, there's a certain amount of reflection, and then those reflections then are used to inform the desired outcomes, and then that's used to inform the mission, and you go through this process over and over again, and hopefully you will continuously make change, or rather the organization will continually make change. So number 6, powerful organizations impact policy through advocacy. So they follow legislative changes that impact their organization's ability to deliver programs and services. And there are various ways that you can follow legislative changes. You can subscribe to newsletters. You can obviously, join various associations, and they will share their analysis. You can keep up with the newspaper and all that good stuff. And based on what they read, they will contact their elected officials with comments or concerns about the policies. And at the appropriate time, when there are public meetings that are necessary, they will provide written and oral testimony at the public meetings, or they might do a letter to the editor, or they might just write a letter to their elected officials or do a petition. And then they typically participate in associations and broad coalitions that provide input into legislation and policies that impact their particular sectors, so that they can lift all boats within that sector and not just their own organization. They become known as thought leaders. So we've come to the end of lesson 2, and any questions regarding this course can be addressed to me at Valerie F. Leonard at nonprofitutopia.com. If you are a Nonprofit Utopia member, you can post in the course forum. And if you're not, feel free to email me any questions. You can join Nonprofit Utopia by going to nonprofitutopia.mn.co. You can follow Nonprofit Utopia on Twitter, and you can find Nonprofit Utopia on Facebook. I just want to remind you too, if you have not yet done so, please go to your workbook. Make sure that you review your notes and respond to the quiz questions, and I will see you in lesson 3.